Shark Tank is one of those rare reality TV shows that's good, it's fun to watch. It has the right formula for everyday people to just find it binge-worthy entertainment. If you were to boil it down to the main reason for the show's success, it would have to be conflict. Everyone on the show is constantly arguing, and viewers absolutely love it. But why is that? Well, for one, humans have always been fascinated by conflict. It's the easiest way to get the adrenaline going without moving an inch. People also just really love drama. And on Shark Tank, the arguments are especially intense because they revolve around something that interests a lot of people: money. The sharks themselves are a huge part of this appeal. It's this bigger-than-life personality. They're supposed to be smart, seasoned investors who pride themselves on their ability to spot a good deal and avoid scams, which was somewhat true until they met this guy.
$500,000 from Mark Cuban for 15%, and $500,000 from the rest of the sharks. We're going to split it for a total of 30% for $1 million. And the power of Shark Tank. What are you going to do?
I accept.
This is Charles Yim, the notorious inventor of the first smartphone breathalyzer, which he of course called the Breathometer. With a name like that, you know, how couldn't this be a smash hit? Breathometer is a prime example of how a great pitch can fool even the shrewdest of minds.
Breathometer, the world's first smartphone breathalyzer.
But the real question is, how did he do it? From what I've seen of the show, all the sharks, and especially Mark Cuban, are pretty sharp at calling out scam business models. There's examples of this from the show, like the time they destroyed Minuscal for claiming their fat-blocking snack bars and tablets could cut 100 calories from meals just by taking 2 pills. Mark Cuban was the first one to spot this and seem initially skeptical.
The evidence shows that the people who took our product versus the placebo also lost weight.
Look, guys, you know I'm a skeptic on all this stuff. You can't claim that it's going to reduce 100 calories out of what you eat by taking 2 pills.
We don't make that claim.
That's what he said.
But of course, the further it went on, everybody else joined in.
It won't make you lose weight. It will help you.
It will help you lose weight, but it won't make you lose weight.
Actually, Crom, now you're pissing me off.
Yeah.
You're digging a deeper hole. And it's got nothing to do with
You're kind of losing credibility.
You just said you're not losing weight. What does it say right here?
And Mark again was at the forefront of when he tore into Manish Sethi of Pavlok, who pitched a watch that zapped its users to break bad habits.
Persian therapy is legit, but what's not legit is trying to take credit for other studies and apply it to your product.
He labeled the product nonsense and even went as far to call Manish a con artist.
It's nonsense, Robert. You're such a con artist.
So obviously they can be brutally honest and they're not going to suffer fools. So how exactly did Charles manage to win all of them over? Funnily enough, somebody on YouTube comments summed this up pretty well. Little did anyone know, Charles was the shark in that room. So let's take a look. For some background, a breathalyzer is a device used to detect the amount of alcohol in a person's body, often called the blood alcohol concentration, or BAC for short. However, the thing about traditional high-quality breathalyzers is that they're both expensive and large enough to be a hassle to carry around. Charles Yim came out on the show with his revolutionary breathometer, a device that he claimed fixes both of these issues and more. It was supposed to work just as accurately as a regular breathalyzer. It could be used by plugging it into your smartphone and even let you hail a cab with the push of a button, you know, in case you got carried away at the club that night and the breathalyzer was telling you, no, you can't drive. Obviously this was fake, which we found out later. But how was he able to convince the judges? Well, it's always going to be true that if you have some kind of background, people are more inclined to believe you. For example, when J.D. Claridge and Charles Manning pitched their drone company, X-Craft.
Yeah, so I have worked, an aerospace engineer by trade.
I started out of school and worked at Oracle and have been in software my whole history.
All the sharks agreed to be in on the deal, and the duo got 3 times the money they originally asked for. Similarly, Charles knew exactly what he was talking about. Not only did he have a tech background,
But are you a software guy? Are you a hardware design guy?
So I used to code back in the day.
he was also working with modern sensors, something that Mark Cuban even claimed was the future of technology.
I'm a big fan of the sensor business. I've got a company, Motion Loft. We're all about sensors, and I think that's the future of technology.
But much like the technical background giving somebody more credibility, A business background, especially in a room full of investors, will definitely increase the likelihood of them trusting you. And for Charles, that's exactly what he also had.
If you sold your last business and you did very well, why didn't you take some of that money and invest it in this?
I have. So I started off with the first initial $50,000. I've already raised $500,000 in total from angels.
If you watch enough Shark Tank, you're going to see business experiences in short supply, because most pitchers are from first-timers who just entered the world of business themselves. Charles, by contrast, was a seemingly successful entrepreneur who had already built and sold his first company in just 18 months, which certainly helped sway the Sharks' favor.
I built and sold my last company within 18 months.
It gave them some idea, some proof that Charles and his ideas can be trusted. We know this to be true because in the previous season, season 4, Maria and Veronica pitched a unique bedbug detection system, which eventually got all 5 Sharks to invest with a little persuasion. Even though they were offered $5 million for the trademarks and patents from another company, they refused the offer because they believed buggy beds was worth way more.
And you turned that down?
Yes. I know what we have here. I know the value.
The Sharks saw this rejection in the same light as proof that the buggy beds product could be trusted with their money, because other people were after it and because the owners were smart enough to knock this deal back and wait for more. Another aspect that made Yim a solid contestant in the Sharks' eyes was his long-term vision. During his pitch, he talked about ideas he had for future products, like a similar sensor-based device for detecting diabetes, and another product that he did launch years later with Philips, though that product was taken off shelves as well, but that's a story for later. And of course, there's always going to be one thing that sets people apart in any room you enter, and that is confidence. He was a smooth-talking, confident man. Not only was his pitch perfect, he also tackled difficult questions from Mr. Wonderful without any hesitation.
First and foremost, there's no replacement for good judgment. And so the Breathometer device basically promotes making smarter and safer decisions. We provide the instruction manual, we clearly labeled disclaimers throughout the app.
Though, as you can see by now, his pitch was nearly perfect. I mean, even I would have invested in this if the product came to me. Well, maybe if I had $500,000 just lying around, of course. But even if you take away all the things that the pitch had, that Charles had, the biggest thing is that the product, the Breathometer, had the legs to stand on its own as it solved a massive problem. To give you an idea of just how massive, drunk driving crashes claim nearly 37 lives per day in America. In 2022 alone, nearly 14,000 Americans met their deaths through an accident that could easily have been prevented. But perhaps the biggest reason Mark invested in the Breathometer went beyond market value and potential profits. Maybe the reason was a lot more personal for him. In an interview with CBS, Mark's younger brother, Brian Cuban, shared that he suffered from an alcohol addiction for decades.
Nothing changed the image in the mirror, no matter how much Xanax, how much alcohol I drank. I woke up in the morning, I hated myself even more. It was the same guy in the mirror.
This undoubtedly would have been difficult on Mark. Mark is known for sometimes thinking of his family when investing in new businesses, attaching a sentimental value to his investments. A perfect example of this is when he offered $400,000 for 15% equity after hearing 19-year-old Tania Speaks pitch her beauty company. This came with a condition that she meet his 2 teenage daughters.
I have a daughter who's 14, and I have a daughter who's 17. Alyssa and Alexis, and I want them to meet you, and I want them to learn from you, and maybe you'll even learn some from them.
So for Mark, the Breathometer might have felt like the right product for him to invest at that time, which is maybe why he ended up with a 15% stake in the company. But with that being said, by the end of the pitch, Charles had the Sharks eating out of the palm of his hands. He squeezed out $1 million of investment from all 5 of them, with Cuban taking the lion's share by investing $500,000. So all this sounds great, right? Up until this point, you're thinking, where does it all go wrong? Well, if you look at what happened after this episode aired, you'll find that Charles was stating his company was worth $50 million. However, looking closer, they only reached 40% of their sales goals with a turnover of only $4 million.
We generated $4.2 million that year.
But that was not a number you were advertising. We were talking a $10 million number for Breathometer. We only delivered just over 4. You had much bigger aspirations for that market.
And of course, this is something that could be solved, and Mark especially was planning to increase production with the Sharks' investment. But unfortunately, this story takes a disappointing turn. You see, soon after securing the cash from the Sharks, Charles transported himself back to the year 2000 and went full YOLO. Instead of putting the money into product development, he blew it on epic vacations and wild parties, living it up like there was no tomorrow. It almost feels like he already planned out his expenses from the very beginning. I mean, you can even hear with this clip what Mark had to say about what was happening.
Charles, I look at his Instagram and he'd be in Bora Bora. And then I look at his Instagram.
This guy's
shit. Yes.
What?
2 weeks later, and he'd be in Vegas partying, you know. Then
So according to Mark, it seemed pretty obvious what Charles's plans were, and it didn't seem to involve running the company in any form or legitimate manner.
Then he'd be on Nectar Island with Richard Branson, and I'd text him like, what the fuck are you doing? You're supposed to be working. Oh no, I'm networking.
And obviously it's just a hilarious thing to say that you're, networking by going out partying and flying all over the world living lavishly.
Next thing you know, all the money's gone.
By the time Kevin O'Leary asked Charles for an update on Beyond the Tank, the company was already falling apart.
This company that's worth almost $50 million, 80% of its value is on a product that hasn't even shipped yet.
Yet Charles was still adamant he was and I'll quote him here, pretty supreme networker, and that he met Richard Branson and Mark Cuban through those networking skills.
The second that I've been told actually is I'm a pretty supreme networker. So if I wanted to meet somebody, I was intentionally wanting to meet Mark Cuban. I intentionally wanted to meet Richard Branson. And I figured basically my nodes or people that I knew in terms of how to get to them, or if it was a competition, or if it was, through a particular event.
Overconfidence or pure bullshit, I'm not sure, but it doesn't really matter, does it? What matters is the end result. After all, you could be the best at something, but if it turns to nothing, who cares how good you were? But the one thing you can fall back on with this story is that the Breathometer was still a good product and did what it claimed, right? Right? Well, no, it didn't. In 2016, soon after the launch of Breeze, the Bluetooth version of the original Breathometer, customers began complaining. Inaccurate readings, a buggy app, and the device's failure to work, these complaints were all over the scathing customer reviews. As one user on Best Buy put it, tried setting up the item once I came home, but the required iOS app never worked. The device could not be set up. Another said the device simply didn't work at all, could not get it to work, brought it back to get a second one, that worked for about 10 minutes then stopped. This is unacceptable. YouTubers of course jumped on this with techie video testing 3 smartphone-powered breathalyzers, including Original and Breeze from Breathometer, and according to his findings, Breeze was the most inaccurate of them.
And then the most inconsistent of all of them was the Breathometer Breeze, the Bluetooth version.
But that's not all, because it never is, so the situation then got worse. With all the negative reviews pouring in, it's no surprise that in 2017, the Federal Trade Commission filed a complaint against the company for hyperbolic claims. According to the FTC, ads for both Original and Breeze claimed that the product had undergone, quote, government-grade lab testing and were, quote, FDA registered, which was far from the truth. The company even doubled down on this claim in the FAQ section of the website. Now, of course, you're going to say company lying about what it does. Wow, that's a huge surprise, right? But of course, in the totality, this just gets worse and worse. And a more concerning fact was that both devices understated users' BAC levels, which is misleading at best and disastrously dangerous at worst. According to the FTC, who of course investigated this, the company claimed their device can measure BAC levels from 0.02% to 0.25%, yet they never actually tested for them going beyond 0.02%. Now imagine if somebody had downed a bottle and their breathometer suggested they could drive. Well, that's obviously not going to end well, is it? What's even worse is that despite being aware of all the issues, the company never told consumers about the dangers of relying on their devices. which, let me remind you, would be the only reason to have the device in the first place. So if you can't rely on it, why does it even exist? Why would anybody buy this? So what you have now is a founder who's spending all the money going off partying, lying to his, partners who invested in the company, and a product that doesn't work, and even if it did, is not fit for purpose for anybody who would buy it in the first place. So what you now have is, well, nothing. The response from the company was to tell retailers they would no longer be selling the product, but it was obviously still available for purchase at many stores, including Amazon and Best Buy. According to the FTC at this point, defendants were aware by at least March 2015 that Breeze devices produced inaccurate BAC readings. However, they failed to notify customers that the devices were inaccurate, could understate the user's BAC until June 2016, and failed to disable the Breathometer app's breathalyzer function until October 6, 2016. Now, under pressure from the FTC, the scam company, which is all you can really call it, Breathometer, was finally forced to send out warning emails to retailers and users about its inaccurate products in October of 2016. By that time, they'd already raked in $5.1 million in sales, but that didn't matter because they settled with the FTC and agreed to pay full refunds to any customers who requested them. Which, sadly, of course, is not going to be everybody, because a lot of people just don't bother. They see it as a lost product and then just don't get their money back. But even still, the story doesn't quite end there, because after settling, Charles launched Mint in collaboration with Philips, a device that measured the indicators of poor oral health and bad breath. Charles, the ever-confident con man, made some bold claims about the future of his products.
What are the other things that you could do with this platform?
It can extend into actual diabetes, glucose monitoring, lung cancer detection, which is detected with roughly about 90% accuracy.
It wasn't enough that he was going to save the world from drunk driving originally, and definitely didn't do that. He was now going to save people from lung cancer with detection in a tiny breath analysis device. Obviously, as an idea, yeah, this would be a great technology that everyone would love to see. But at this point, who would trust this man to make it? Especially since after working with Philips, Mint was delisted from Amazon and the Breathometer store in 2021 for, surprise, surprise, not working as advertised. And it just reads like the same story again when you look at the reviews. This device literally just randomly shows different results, not based on anything. Every time I use it, it gives me an A-grade breath reading no matter what. When I first wake up, after eating, after brushing, it's always A. Sounds familiar, right? What a great product. But then you have to ask, what did he have to say for himself? Well, after hearing Mark Cuban go on the Full Send podcast and speak about his behavior, CNBC Make It reached out to Charles and asked. He claimed that he did not spend company money on travel and that Cuban's allegations were, quote, completely off. He also said that Cuban's claims were based on a series of Instagram posts and don't reflect on his abilities as CEO. In his words, you can't look at someone's social media and take it for face value. That's not how social media works. And to be honest, he's right. It doesn't. Everyone posts their best life on social media. But if you compare what somebody's social media was like before they just received $1 million in funding from the sharks, and then after, as well as behind the scenes info of knowing where you are and what you're doing, well, it doesn't really matter at that point, does it? To add on top of this, Charles also claimed that the Breathometer recently agreed to be acquired, but didn't provide any details to go along with this claim. His LinkedIn simply mentions acquired by a family office. So of course this was years ago, so you ask, where's Charles now? After all things are said and done, where is the genius inventor? Since the news about Breathometer blew up, Charles has become more and more elusive. His Instagram is private, and the only way I could learn something about the guy was looking him up on LinkedIn. Which makes it seem like he's tired of being a pretty supreme networker. According to the LinkedIn, he's now the founder and executive chairman of VitaBowl, which was founded in 2019, and Skeleton Labs, which was founded in 2020. He also built and sold another company in 2018, Cointopia, which was acquired by Vera Labs Inc. In his free time, Charles even mentors some of Stanford University's top entrepreneurs through StartX, a non-profit organization that nurtures budding entrepreneurs through community and education. You know, who wouldn't want to be mentored by a guy who had repeatedly made failed products and sold them for money they wasn't worth and then had to pull them from stores because they didn't work? Then again, he made a bunch of money, so for people who call themselves entrepreneurs, typically on the internet, he probably is someone you'd want to learn from. But wait till you see this. So apparently Charles Yim not only took the money from the investors, failed repeatedly, spent the money allegedly going out partying and things like that, failed multiple more products into the future, and got away with it all, but now he's the founding partner of a $50 million investment fund. What an absolute legend. I mean, who can say failing upwards isn't a thing? Now obviously some people might look at this and see the full story and say, oh, it's pretty difficult to call Charles Yim a scammer. They might get drawn in by his charisma, by the fact that people keep working with him and giving him money, building up a rich resume. But this isn't new. This isn't something that's exclusive only to Charles Yim. In business, this is incredibly common. And just to address the elephant, the fact that Breathometer eventually devolved into a shitty one-star product doesn't take away from the fact that it's still probably a pretty decent idea if it was ever executed properly. Going back through the reviews on Best Buy, you can see people appreciated the idea of a sleek pocket breathalyzer, and they were just expressing disappointment in its poor execution. One user wrote, "I love the idea of this product, but it's just not good quality." Even Mark Cuban, who said it was the worst investment he had ever made, couldn't help but acknowledge it was a great product that sadly didn't reach its full potential.
But you would blow into it and it did alcohol detection. And it was a great idea. And actually a decent product.
And of course, other companies have gone on in the future to do something very similar but better, such as Backtrack, who make police-grade breathalyzers and are actually approved by the FDA. Like the Breathometer, they also launched with a smartphone breathalyzer and are well known for their keychain breathalyzers. The only difference between these two companies is that one works and one never did. So there we go. I'll leave it up to you, the audience. Was this guy actually a scammer? It seems pretty clear-cut to me what he did, especially with what he was doing right after and where the money allegedly went, as well as the repeat history of releasing products that just outright don't work. And it just goes to show for Shark Tank, no one's ever too experienced to be taken for a ride. If you think you are, that's probably when it's going to happen to you. But there we go. Thanks for watching. See you next time.